The airport was busy that morning, but Maya Ellison walked through it with quiet confidence. She carried only a small leather bag and wore simple clothes. Something comfortable for a long flight. Nothing about her looked expensive or loud. And that was exactly how she liked to travel. Most people who passed her would never guess she was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. One of the youngest black CEOs in the country. She preferred to stay private whenever she could, and she never demanded attention from anyone. When she reached the airline check-in counter, she stopped behind a short line of passengers. The two staff members working there were laughing at something on a phone, not even trying to hide their behavior. They barely helped the people in front of them and kept whispering jokes to each other. Maya waited patiently, her hands folded around her passport. She believed in giving people respect. Even when they didn't offer it back, finally, it was her turn. She stepped forward, offered a polite smile, and said, "Good morning. I have a reservation on Flight 62. The staff members looked at her, and their smiles slowly changed into something else. It wasn't friendliness, and it wasn't professionalism. It was the kind of smile that made her feel judged before she even said another word. One of them, a young man with messy hair and a careless attitude, took her passport. He glanced at her photo, then at her face, then at her hair. Maya's natural curls were tied back neatly, and she had always taken great care of them. But the young man nudged his coworker and whispered something. Both of them started laughing again. Louder this time. Maya kept her posture straight, though she felt tension rise in her chest. She didn't want a scene, she didn't want trouble. She just wanted to check in and catch her flight. But the staff were not interested in doing their job. They looked at her hair with mocking curiosity, as if it was something strange. Then the young man said loudly, "Ma'am, do you want us to fix that for you?" Passengers nearby turned their heads. Surprised by the comment, Maya took a slow breath and said calmly, "There is nothing wrong with my hair," but the staff member wasn't done. He stepped from behind the counter, something he didn't need to do. His coworker laughed and encouraged him. The young man reached for a drawer, pulled out a pair of small scissors, and waved them like a toy. "We can trim it a little. Make it look nicer," he said before Maya could step back. He reached out and grabbed one of her curls. With a quick snip, he cut off a small piece of her hair. His coworker burst into laughter, and the sound echoed across the airport hall. For a moment, Maya felt completely still. She stared at the staff member. Holding the cut piece of her hair between his fingers like it meant nothing, people around them watched. Shocked, but unsure what to do, some lowered their eyes. Others whispered to each other. But no one spoke up. Maya held out her hand slowly. The young man placed the cut curl into her palm. Still laughing, "It's just a joke," he said. "Don't be so serious," his coworker added. "You'll thank us later." Their disrespect hung in the air like something poisonous. Maya folded the small piece of hair into a tissue from her bag. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes had gone cold and unblinking. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't insult them. "I want my passport back," she said softly. The young man rolled his eyes and tossed it toward her. She caught it calmly, placed it in her bag, and walked away without another word. The staff kept laughing behind her, thinking the moment was over, thinking they had embarrassed a random passenger, thinking they were funny. They had no idea what they had just done. Maya found an empty seat near the large windows facing the runway. She sat down, her hands steady, her breath even, but inside her mind, something sharp and focused was forming. This was not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. This was humiliation, and it was public. And Maya Ellison was not a woman who ignored something like this. She took out her phone and made one call. Her voice remained calm, but the meaning behind her words was powerful. "I need a full report on Northwing Airlines," she said. "Start the process now." Her legal team knew exactly what the process meant. It meant investigations, audits, media exposure, and consequences. The airline staff who had joked about her hair had no idea who she was, but they were about to learn. And the airline that allowed them to behave this way was about to face something far bigger than a complaint. Because Maya did not fight with anger, she fought with power. And the airline had just made the worst mistake imaginable. Maya sat by the large airport window with calm eyes, but inside her mind, a quiet storm was forming. She watched planes moving across the runway, taking off one after another, their engines loud but steady. Everything around her seemed normal, yet she knew her day had changed the moment those scissors touched her hair. She wasn't a woman who reacted quickly or emotionally. She was the kind of person who thought before she spoke and planned before she moved. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she answered right away. It was her chief legal officer, a sharp woman named Dana, who understood the weight behind Maya's voice. "Maya, I received your message," Dana said. What happened? Maya didn't raise her voice or show anger. She simply explained what the staff had done. Every detail, every insult, every moment of disrespect. Dana stayed silent for a long second, the kind of silence that carried shock and disbelief. "They cut your hair," Dana finally said. Almost whispering the words, "Yes," Maya replied calmly. "And they laughed. They did." Dana inhaled sharply. "We will handle this," Maya nodded. "Start with their internal policies, their misconduct history, and any past cases involving discrimination," while Dana began the process. Maya checked the time. Her flight was still an hour away. But she no longer cared about traveling. Her schedule could wait, her meetings could be postponed. But this situation could not be ignored. Not by her, not by her company. Not by anyone who believed in respect across the hall. The two staff members were still laughing with each other. They acted like they had done nothing wrong. They didn't look in her direction. They didn't think twice. To them, she was just a random woman. Someone they could mock and mistreat without consequences. Their arrogance was loud even from a distance. Then something unexpected happened. A middle-aged man wearing a gray business suit walked up to them. He had seen what happened earlier, but had stayed quiet like many others. But now he looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot, finally. He approached Maya at her seat, hesitating slightly. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I saw what they did." Maya looked up. Her expression calm but alert. "It was wrong," he continued. "I should have said something at that moment." Maya nodded slowly. "Thank you for coming forward." He handed her a small business card. "If you need a witness, I'm willing to speak." She accepted it with a slight nod, appreciating his courage even if it came late. Soon another woman approached, a flight attendant who had watched everything from across the hall. Her eyes held guilt. "I wasn't allowed to interfere," she whispered. "But what they did. It was cruel." Maya thanked her softly, even though they had not stopped the humiliation. They were now helping bring the truth forward. One witness was useful, two were powerful. Three could change the whole case. Her phone vibrated again. Dana's voice came through with intensity. "Maya, you need to hear this." She had already pulled up reports, records, and complaints from past passengers about the same airline. There were cases of rude behavior, discrimination, and unprofessional staff. Some involved insulting passengers, some involved violating policies. But none were as direct or physical as what happened to Maya. "This incident is severe," Dana said. "I'm preparing the necessary legal actions, but I need to ask, how far do you want to go?" Maya looked at the folded tissue in her hand, the small curl inside it now cold and still. She thought about young black women and girls who faced comments about their hair every day. She thought about how often people dismissed disrespect as jokes. She thought about dignity, identity, and the quiet strength she carried everywhere she went. "How far?" Maya repeated softly. "Far enough that it never happens again," Dana said. Maya nodded. "Then we go all the way." At that moment, an announcement came through the airport speakers. "Attention passengers on Flight 62. Boarding will begin shortly." Maya didn't move. She wasn't getting on that plane anymore. Instead, she stood up, walked toward the large windows, and made another phone call. This time, it wasn't to her legal team. This call was to someone with even more power. It was to the board chair of her company. "A man who trusted her judgment completely, Maya," he answered immediately. "What's wrong, Northwing Airlines?" she said simply. "We need to talk." 30 minutes later, a meeting was scheduled, an emergency one, not for next week, not for tomorrow, but for today. Because when a CEO like Maya moved, the entire company moved with her. And while she stood there, staring at the runway, the two staff members laughed at another passenger. Still unaware that the ground beneath their feet was already shaking, still unaware that their joke was about to bring down an entire airline, Maya reached the private conference room inside the airport's business lounge, a quiet place used by executives and VIP travelers. She didn't look angry, but she looked focused. The kind of focus people recognized as dangerous when it came from a person in power. Her assistant, Jordan, arrived minutes later with a tablet, files, and a portable speaker for the video meeting. He had heard only the headline of what happened, but even that had left him stunned. Maya, "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I'm fine," she replied calmly. "We have work to do." Jordan nodded. Trusting her strength the same way everyone in her company did, he set up the screen as board members from different cities prepared to join the emergency call. When the meeting began, 10 faces appeared on the screen. All senior board members, all leaders who respected Maya, not just as a CEO, but as a visionary. Most of them greeted her with concern. The chairman, Robert Hayes, spoke first. "We're here, Maya." "Tell us what happened." Maya explained everything from the beginning. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't dramatize. She only spoke the facts, each one sharp enough to cut through the room. She described how the staff mocked her, how they touched her without permission, and how they cut her hair like it was entertainment as she spoke. The expressions on the board members' faces shifted from shock to outrage to something even deeper. Disbelief turned into anger. Anger turned into resolve when she was finished. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Roberts' voice came through first, low and steady. "This is beyond unacceptable." Another board member, Ellen, leaned forward. "They assaulted you." "Maya, yes," Maya said quietly. "They also humiliated a black woman in public," Ellen added. "That alone is a legal disaster waiting to happen." Jordan placed a stack of documents in front of Maya. "These are the reports from Dana," he said. "The airline has a long record of employee complaints and customer issues." Maya flipped through the pages silently. There were incidents involving discrimination, misconduct, unprofessional jokes, ignoring protocols, and poor management. Nothing had been addressed properly. The airline had ignored warnings, ignored training failures, ignored basic respect. One board member shook his head. "Their entire culture is rotten," another added. "If this is how they treat passengers, imagine what they hide from the public." Robert looked directly at Maya and asked the question that mattered most. "What response do you want us to make?" Maya took a slow breath before answering. "Not a public apology," she said. "Not a suspension, not a lawsuit that settles quietly and disappears." Everyone leaned in. "Waiting, we are going to shut them down," Maya said calmly. There was a moment of stunned silence, then Robert spoke again. "You're serious?" "I am," Maya replied. "This airline has had years of warnings and failures. And today they crossed a line that cannot be walked back." She placed the folded tissue with the small curl on the table. The board members understood immediately this was not just business. This was dignity. This was human respect. This was Maya drawing a line no one was allowed to cross. Robert nodded slowly. "Legally, ethically, and professionally. We can do it." Dana's voice came through the speaker next. "I've already prepared the initial steps. We can push for a full investigation, a public inquiry, and pressure regulators," another board member added. "If we withdraw our partnership contracts and ongoing funding, the airline has no financial foundation left." Jordan looked between them. Surprised by how quickly everything was moving, Maya sat still, letting them speak, letting the room align itself around her decision. She didn't have to push. She only needed to set the direction. Her board trusted her leadership, and they trusted her judgment. Finally, Robert said the words everyone was waiting for. "Then we move forward. There will be no warnings, no negotiations, no second chances. This airline is finished." Minutes later, steps were approved, motions were passed, and every board member signed the initial authorization. Jordan recorded the session and sent the documents directly to Dana's legal team. Everything was set in motion faster than any major corporate action the company had taken in years. When the meeting ended, the screen turned black, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. Jordan stood quietly nearby, unsure whether to speak finally. Maya looked at him and said softly, "They thought it was a joke." Jordan nodded. "They're about to learn it wasn't." Maya stood up, straightened her bag, and walked out of the lounge. She didn't need security. She didn't need attention. She didn't need cameras. She only needed the truth to unfold. And at that moment, across the airport, the two staff members who had mocked her were still smiling, still laughing, still unaware that their entire world had just shifted under their feet because while they joked, Maya Ellison had already begun to dismantle the company they worked for. Piece by piece, contract by contract, truth by truth, and soon, the whole world would know what they had done. While Maya left the lounge and walked toward the quiet side of the terminal, her legal team was already in motion. Dana and her staff were gathering documents at lightning speed, reviewing contracts, partnership files, and old complaints that Northwing Airlines had ignored for years. Every missed report, every unaddressed warning, every mishandled case was now being pulled into one place. The airline had no idea that the woman they humiliated at the counter was the last person they should have underestimated. Across the terminal, the two staff members, Ethan and Carrie, continued their shift like nothing had happened. Ethan leaned back against the counter, scrolling on his phone, laughing at random videos. Carrie chewed gum loudly, looking bored, tapping her nails on the desk. Neither noticed that several passengers were whispering about the earlier incident. A few had even taken discreet videos, unsure of how to react, but knowing something wrong had happened. One of those passengers, a young teacher named Brianna, approached another woman who had witnessed the whole thing. "We should report it," Brianna said nervously. "Something about it felt dangerous." The older woman shook her head. "I tried once before with this airline. They didn't care." Brianna sighed, but the thought stayed in her mind. She kept replaying the scene of Maya staying calm while being humiliated, wondering how someone could hold so much control under such disrespect. Meanwhile, Maya sat in a quiet waiting area. Away from the noise, she wasn't hiding, she was thinking. Her face remained calm, but her mind was sharp and awake. She knew that exposing the truth wasn't just about one moment. It was about years of behavior the airline had ignored, years of complaints pushed aside, years of staff being allowed to mistreat people without consequences. Her phone buzzed again. Dana's voice spoke quickly. "Maya, you need to hear this. We found 3 past complaints involving Ethan," Dana said. All ignored by the airline, Maya closed her eyes for a moment. "Listening quietly, describe them," she said. 2 involved mocking passengers of color," Dana explained. "The 3rd involved touching a woman's hair without permission, and none were addressed," Maya asked. "Not one," Dana replied. "They marked each report as resolved, but none were investigated." Maya opened her eyes slowly, the truth hitting her like a cold blade. "They allowed him to keep hurting people," she said quietly. "Yes," Dana replied. "And now the regulators will see that pattern at that same time." The airline's regional manager, a man named Stewart, walked through the terminal holding a clipboard. He was there for a routine inspection, unaware that a crisis was already forming behind him. Stewart approached Ethan and Carrie with a friendly smile. "How's everything going?" he asked. Carrie shrugged. "Same old boring morning," Ethan smirked. "Yeah. Except this lady earlier got all dramatic over nothing." Stewart raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ethan laughed, waving the scissors he kept in his back pocket. "We just made a small joke about her hair. She acted like it was the end of the world." Stewart's smile faded instantly. "You touched a passenger?" he asked sharply. Carrie giggled. "Relax, boss. It was funny." Stewart's face went pale. Passengers nearby overheard the words and stared, whispering louder. Before Stewart could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was the corporate office calling something that never happened during a normal morning shift. He stepped aside and answered in a quiet voice. In seconds, his face dropped even further. The call was short but powerful. The board of Northwing Airlines had been notified that a major incident involving passenger assault and discrimination had occurred. They demanded immediate lockdown of internal files. immediate suspension of involved staff, and immediate contact with legal teams. Stewart hung up slowly, his hands trembling. He turned back toward Ethan and Carrie, and for the first time they saw fear in his eyes. "What did you two do?" he whispered. Ethan shrugged again. "It was a joke." Stewart shook his head. "Not this time, meanwhile." Maya stood and walked toward the large atrium of the terminal. She didn't look hurried. She didn't look tense. She looked like someone who already knew she had one. She had spent her entire life fighting battles with intelligence, not anger, and this moment was no different. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was the chairman, Robert. His voice was steady but urgent. "Maya, news is spreading inside the airline faster than we expected. We're moving to the next phase. We're informing aviation regulators." "Investors and our media contacts?" Maya nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "Let the truth reach them before the airline tries to hide it across the airport." Ethan and Carrie still didn't understand what they had triggered, but the whispers were growing. The tension in the air was changing, and soon everyone in that terminal would know the truth, because the joke they thought was harmless was now turning into the biggest scandal the airline had ever faced. And the woman they mocked was already preparing the blow that would collapse their entire company. The tension inside Northwing Airlines headquarters rose like a storm cloud. Even though the morning had started like any other, employees walked through the hallways carrying coffee cups and paperwork, unaware that the next few hours would tear the company apart. But in one office, the silence had already cracked. The legal department had received an explosive message from Maya's company, and within minutes, the entire leadership was panicking. The CEO of Northwing Airlines, a man named Harold Briggs, stared at his screen with growing fear. He had survived many crises, but this one felt different. The message was direct, detailed, and backed by legal evidence. It stated that a severe act of assault and discrimination had occurred at one of their airport counters. It named the employees, listed the witnesses, and attached recorded statements from passengers. More importantly, it revealed who the victim was. When Harold read the name Maya Ellison, he felt his stomach drop. He knew exactly who she was. Her company wasn't just powerful, it was a major investor in several airline partnerships, including Northwing's largest development project if Maya pulled out her funding. Their expansion plan wouldn't just slow down, it would die. Harold picked up his phone and dialed the regional manager, Stewart, whose voice shook when he answered. "Stewart, what happened at that counter?" Harold demanded. Stewart swallowed hard, sir. "It was worse than I thought," explained. The employees mocked her, touched her hair, and cut it. Harold closed his eyes, as if the words physically hurt. "Do they know who she is?" he asked. "No, sir," Stewart said. "But they're about to find out back at the airport." A thick quiet settled over the counter where Ethan and Carrie stood. Their laughter had faded as soon as they noticed passengers staring at them with disgust. Something felt wrong. Something felt dangerous. Ethan frowned. "Why is everyone looking at us like that?" Carrie shrugged, but worry flickered in her eyes. Then Stewart stormed back toward them, holding his clipboard tightly. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. "You too," he said, pointing at them. "Step away from the counter now," Ethan laughed nervously. "Why? What's going on now?" Stewart repeated, his voice sharp enough to cut through the air. They moved aside, confused and irritated. But when two security officers approached them, their confidence finally cracked. "This is ridiculous," Carrie muttered. Ethan raised his voice. "We didn't do anything." Stewart looked at them with a mix of anger and fear. "You assaulted a passenger," he said. "And not just any passenger," he hesitated, then added. "You assaulted a CEO who has enough power to destroy this airline." Ethan's face drained of color. "What?" he whispered. Stewart nodded. "You cut her hair." Carrie shook her head quickly. "It was a joke." Stewart stepped closer. "That joke might cost thousands of people their jobs." Meanwhile, Maya was quietly walking through the airport, heading toward a private room reserved for high-profile passengers. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting. Her phone buzzed again, and she answered. Dana spoke quickly. "Regulators have opened an emergency investigation." Maya listened without interrupting. Reporters already picked up fragments of the story from witnesses, Dana said. It's spreading faster than we expected. Maya nodded. Good, she replied calmly at the same time. Several witnesses who recorded the incident were posting their videos online. Within minutes, views began climbing. Comments poured in. People were furious, shocked, heartbroken, and many were calling for the airline to be shut down. Inside the airline's headquarters, Harold was pacing across his office. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Regulators, lawyers, PR teams, investors, everyone demanding answers. His assistant walked in trembling. Sir. Reporters are outside the building, Harold sighed. Knowing the truth had spread quicker than wildfire. Prepare a statement, he said quietly. But sir, she whispered. Maya's team already released one. Harold stopped breathing for a second. What did they say? His assistant handed him the printed statement. It was short, factual, and devastating. It described the incident without naming the employees. But it named the airline clearly. The final line read, "We have begun the process of ending all partnerships with Northwing Airlines." Harold felt the world tilt around him. If that happened, the airline would collapse before the week ended. Back at the airport, Ethan and Carrie sat in a small security office. The room felt colder than ice. Ethan rubbed his face with trembling hands. "We ruined everything," Carrie whispered. "We didn't mean to. It doesn't matter," Ethan said. "We still did it." They both looked sick with fear. For the first time, they understood the weight of their actions. Meanwhile, Maya sat alone in the private room. Calm and unshaken, she didn't seek revenge. She sought responsibility if she stayed quiet. The same thing would happen to another woman. Maybe a young girl, maybe someone without power. And Maya wasn't going to let that happen as the airline struggled to hold itself together. As headquarters collapsed into chaos, and as the story spread across the country, one truth became clear. The collapse had begun, and there was no stopping it now, at sunrise the next morning. Airports across the country looked normal from the outside. Passengers dragged suitcases, workers pushed carts, and planes lined up on the runway, but inside the offices of Northwing Airlines, nothing was normal anymore. The company felt like it was standing on thin, cracking ice. Everyone sensed something bad was coming, even before the phones started ringing non-stop by 8 o'clock. The aviation regulators arrived at Northwing's headquarters without warning. They walked in with clipboards, badges, and a firm silence that sent fear through the building. Harold, the CEO, rushed down the hallway to meet them, hoping he still had a chance to save something. But the lead investigator, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, stopped him with a single sentence. "Mr. Briggs, we're here to conduct a full shutdown inspection," she said. Harold's breath caught in his throat. "Shut down," he repeated weakly. "Yes," she replied. Effective immediately, the staff watching from nearby desks froze. Some covered their mouths, others whispered frantically. They all knew the situation was bad, but no one expected this level of action. The inspectors moved through the building like a cold wind, checking documents, interviewing employees, collecting reports. The truth was unfolding fast. And none of it worked in Northwing's favor. Meanwhile, at the airport, Maya sat in a quiet cafe with a warm drink in her hands. She wasn't celebrating, she wasn't smiling, she was thinking. She understood the weight of what was happening. This wasn't about destroying a company for revenge. This was about exposing a broken system so no one else would be harmed. Her assistant Jordan arrived with updates. "Maya, the footage from yesterday went viral overnight," he said. "Millions of views." Maya looked out the window at the runway, her expression steady. "Are people talking about the bigger issue?" she asked. "Yes," Jordan said quickly. "Hair discrimination, racial disrespect, workplace culture. Everything." Maya nodded slowly. That was what mattered most to her. Not the downfall of an airline, but the rise of awareness. Back at Northwing headquarters, Harold sat in a meeting room with shaking hands across from him. The investigators spread documents across the table. "Your staff have been reported multiple times for discriminatory behavior," one said. "Your management ignored these reports," another added. "And yesterday, a passenger was physically harmed. Harold tried to defend the company. but his voice lacked strength. "We didn't know she was." The lead investigator raised a hand. Stopping him, "Her status doesn't matter," she said. "What happened was wrong, no matter who she was." Harold had no answer. Because she was right. Meanwhile, Ethan and Carrie sat in a separate office at the airport. Waiting for official action, their faces looked pale. "Drained of sleep and confidence, I swear." "I didn't think it would go this far," Ethan whispered. Carrie wiped tears from her eyes. "Why did we think it was funny?" A security officer stood by the door, silent and expressionless. They both knew their jobs were gone, but now, it was no longer about losing a job. It was about the weight of what they had done at 10:30. The announcement every employee feared came over the intercom. "All Northwing flights are now grounded," passengers gasped. Workers exchanged looks of panic, and pilots froze in place. No one had ever heard those words before. Airlines grounded planes only for severe emergencies. And today, the emergency was one they caused themselves. Harold walked into the control room and looked at the large digital map displaying the airline's entire network. All routes, all destinations, all operations. Now red lights flashed across the screen, marking every grounded flight. It looked like a map losing its heartbeat. He felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. He knew there was no recovering from this. Back in the cafe, Jordan's phone vibrated again. He scanned the message and looked up at Maya. "It's official," he said quietly. "The airline is shutting down operations." Maya exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in acceptance. "People are going to lose their jobs," she said softly. "Yes," Jordan replied. "But the investigation shows the leadership ignored years of warnings." Maya nodded. "Then the responsibility is on them, across the country." News channels broke into programming with urgent banners. Northwing Airlines shut down after discrimination scandal. The story was everywhere. TV screens, social media, newspapers, blogs, radio stations. Families discussed it at breakfast tables. Workers talked about it in break rooms. Students shared it at school. Everyone knew the name Northwing Airlines. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew why the skies suddenly went silent for that company. Meanwhile, Maya stood up from her seat. Gathering her bag, she didn't look triumphant. She looked thoughtful. The world had reacted. Justice had moved quickly, and the truth was finally out. But one part of this journey wasn't finished yet. There was still something she had to face. Someone she had to confront. The airport was crowded. But the air felt strangely quiet around Maya as she walked toward the administrative wing. She didn't move fast. She didn't move slow. She moved with the calm assurance of someone who understood her power and her purpose. Jordan followed a step behind, carrying a folder full of reports, witness statements, and legal documents. He looked nervous, but Maya didn't. Her face stayed steady, her shoulders stayed relaxed, and her eyes stayed focused at the far end of the hallway. A small meeting room stood open. Inside, for people waited. Stewart, the regional manager, sat stiffly in a chair, his hands clasped tightly together. Across from him sat Ethan and Carrie, looking like two people who finally understood what fear felt like. Between them stood a senior investigator from the Aviation Authority, holding a clipboard with cold professionalism. When Maya entered the room, every head turned toward her. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. Carrie's eyes watered the moment she saw her. Stewart stood up quickly and lowered his head. "Miss Ellison," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." She nodded once, then took the seat at the front of the table. The investigator began the session with a straightforward tone. "We are here to document the final statements of those involved," she said. "No arguments, no interruptions. Just truth." Her voice held the kind of weight that left no room for excuses. Ethan looked at the table as if he couldn't face anyone. Carrie twisted her hands in her lap, trying not to cry. Stewart stared ahead. Ashamed that he had ignored early warning signs about his staff, Maya said nothing. She simply waited. The investigator turned to Ethan first. "You may speak," she said. Ethan hesitated, then lifted his eyes. "I was stupid," he whispered. I thought it was funny." His voice cracked under the pressure of the moment. "I didn't think about how it would make her feel. I didn't think it was serious." I didn't think at all. Maya watched him quietly, offering no reaction. Carrie spoke next. Her voice trembling, I followed along. She said, I should have stopped him. I should have said something. I knew it was wrong. But I laughed anyway. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, her apology floated in the air. Thin and fragile, the investigator wrote notes slowly, letting their words settle. Then she looked at Maya. Miss Ellison, would you like to say anything? She asked. Jordan glanced at Maya, unsure what she would do. Everyone in the room braced themselves. Maya took a breath, calm and controlled. Her voice was soft, but every word felt like truth laid bare. You didn't just cut my hair, she said. You cut my dignity. Ethan lowered his head even further. You didn't treat me like a human being, she continued. You treated me like entertainment. Carrie covered her mouth as tears fell. But this isn't just about me, Maya said. This is about every woman who walked up to this counter and was disrespected. This is about every passenger who didn't have the power to fight back. This is about every ignored complaint. Every dismissed report, every insult pushed aside as a joke. Her words hung in the silence like a truth no one could escape. Stuart looked sick with regret. He finally spoke, his voice low and broken. Miss Ellison, I failed, he said. I should have stopped this long before it reached you. I carried warning signs in my hands and pretended not to see them. Maya nodded slowly. Accountability is not about blame, she replied. It's about responsibility. The investigator closed her folder. The statements are complete, she said. You will all receive formal notices. She stepped aside. Leaving the room still and heavy, Ethan and Carrie waited, hoping Maya might say something more, something forgiving, something gentle, something that would make them feel lighter. But Maya stood up calmly and looked at them with steady eyes. I don't hate you, she said quietly. But I won't excuse you, not because of who I am, but because of what you did. People deserve respect. Even when you think no one is watching, Ethan nodded weakly. Tears filling his eyes, Carrie sobbed into her hands. Stuart looked down, ashamed. Jordan stood beside Maya, steady and proud. Maya picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. Let this change you, she said softly. Or all of this means nothing. She walked out of the room with calm grace, leaving behind the people who had broken something they never understood, and the people who now had to live with the consequences of their actions. Because justice wasn't loud, justice wasn't angry, justice was quiet, firm, and final. Northwing Airlines was already collapsing. But this moment, this confrontation, was the lesson that would echo long after the company was gone.